Welcome back to another episode of the Weekly InSalt. You guys probably know me, but just in case you're listening for the first time, my name is Wade Lassen. I'm always joined by my co-host, Laura.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Gearing up for surgery.
Yeah, okay. It'll go fine.
Yeah.
Your surgery will be fine.
I hope so.
You have a torn ligament in your thumb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not fun. With always joined as well with the dictator of sound, Kurt.
Yep.
Hey, man.
Hey, Kurt.
Yep. Always here.
And then James is here.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll just say that, James. Is that okay?
James, Jimmy, whatever.
Jimmy's here. And then for our main guest today, I don't feel like I should be introducing you. I feel like Kurt.
Yeah.
Take it away,
Go
man.
for it, Kurt.
So our second guest on the show is a guy that wears many hats. Number one, he is the owner of Pro Musician Outlet up in Clearfield, and he is a renowned guitar collector and historian, and also my dad. Please welcome Lynn Wheelwright.
Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Sure. Happy to be here.
What a great intro. I liked it.
That was. Did you practice that?
A few times, yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. Sorry that you had to miss bowling just to talk with us for an hour, but Jimmy really wanted you to be here. He's a huge fan. But you have been into guitars for pretty much most of your life, right?
I started playing when I was 11.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it playing out of just you were interested in it, or like what sparked your interest in getting into guitars?
I was one of those kids in the generation that saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in '64, and decided playing guitar was a good way to get chicks.
Okay.
Did it work?
Because I was 11, I don't know. And my friends wanted to start a band, and so I begged my dad to buy me a guitar for Christmas. And we were kind of poor; he didn't have any money, and so he traded his favorite shotgun for a Silvertone amping case guitar and gave it to me for Christmas.
Aw.
And that kicked it off.
And then we started playing in my buddy's garage, and then almost immediately I had to move to Cheyenne, Wyoming. My dad was a Minuteman missile guy, and he got TDY to Cheyenne and then to Kimball, Nebraska, which was a two people place.
Yeah.
And it was one of those places where all 6 grades of the elementary school were in one room.
Wow.
That's how big it was.
So there was no band players there.
I used to sit on top of my roof in Cheyenne with my amp on the roof and play, hoping somebody would hear me and want to come play. And it never happened.
Yeah.
And we got back to Utah, and my buddies had moved, and I sold the guitar and amp, and then when I headed off for Vietnam when I was 18, I joined when I was 17, and I bought another guitar in Okinawa on the way over and started playing again.
Okay, yeah. So you're just loved playing guitar. I can imagine, if you're in a small town, you're just not much to do, so sit and play guitar and learn it, and it just grows from there.
Roy wasn't that small of a town then.
Yeah, that's true.
But
that's true.
it was just the thing, the thing that you did, just fads. And I never got any good, still suck.
I was going to ask, so when do you feel like you got good at guitar?
I never got good. I quit playing in 1984.
But then at some point in your life, that evolved into a passion of repairing guitars and selling guitars, obviously.
That's one of the reasons I quit playing in 1984. Because I got so busy building custom guitars and working on guitars. I was guitar tech for most of the stores in northern Utah, Guitar City in Centerville, and then on up to Progressive and a bunch of the stores in Ogden. And I had a construction company at the same time. And, something had to give. And playing was just for enjoyment. It wasn't paying the bills.
Yeah.
And I was so busy that I couldn't practice anymore. And if you don't practice and you start to suck, you just quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just quit playing guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, I still play well enough to be able to set up a guitar and know what to do, but I don't play anymore.
And that's okay. I mean, I played the drums in high school, and I've told this story on the air before, but after playing in a few bands, I kind of got moved on to my career, and then I stopped playing for years, for like 15 years, and that was kind of the same with you, James. Didn't play forever, and then we're like, hey, let's try again. And when doing it for fun is great, but like when I think about, oh man, I wish I could master this technique or something, a lot of times you just have to stick with it. It is somewhat like riding a bike, but like I don't ever think that I'll be one of the best drummers ever. I'd have to start doing that when I was like 5.
How long have you been playing, James?
So I started playing guitar when I was about 10. And I always had an interest in it, but I want to say I was 13 and had another friend that played guitar, and they were a few years older than me and showed me different techniques and like taught me what actual power chords and stuff like that were, and I kind of went off from that. And then I want to say 2005, I'd already been in a band for a little while. I was the lead singer of the band, and I wasn't playing guitar as much and ended up selling off gear over time, needed money, this and that. And I dropped guitar for almost 18 years. Wow. Yeah. Which is weird. My guitar was like my best friend. It went with me everywhere. I took it every day to school, walking home, over to my friends' houses. I'd sit in parking lots and play my crappy acoustic or like my little Strat. And then, I just kind of dropped it one day because I'm like, not writing music in this band on guitar. I do all the vocals, and got rid of that. And about a year ago is when I hit that point, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I miss this. Like, I always felt like that little piece of me was missing, and started building up my gear and got back into it.
Nice.
Yeah, I noticed that you strategically took all of your guitars home. Knowing that Lynn was going to come in.
Is that what you think I did?
Oh, that's what you did. You told me you were going to do it.
Why?
Why?
No, he just took it home because he took his guitar home to play on it. I'm just kidding.
Why you guys put me on the spot? No, I really did take it home so I could play it at home. I like my ESP a little bit better than my Telecaster. Well, I flip-flop back and forth. I can never decide which I like more and what.
Lynn, if you had, this might be a really tough question, but if you had a favorite guitar of like all time, what would it be? What's like the most legendary guitar that's out there?
Well, favorite has to do with a category.
Okay.
There's historically. Mm-hmm. There's sound and tone wise. There's a guitar that you just like to play. Mm-hmm. In the I like to play category is my 56 Les Paul TV Junior, TV Special. In the I think it sounds, and that's a great sounding guitar through an old Fender Tweed amp. Mm-hmm. Sitting around playing probably my 48 D28 Martin. Historically, and I don't play my historic guitars.
Yeah.
Ever?
No.
It's probably worth so much money, or
no.
At least they're just like the way that they were built.
No, they're great guitars, and I actually loan them to museums, and when they have famous like jazz guys and stuff come through, I will let them take them off exhibit so that they can be played.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I don't want them to just sit there as visual icons, because the guitars were built to be played. They were played by famous people. I've got one of Les Paul's guitars. I've got Charlie Christian's guitar, Alvino's guitar, Alvino Ray's stuff. I've got a bunch of famous, Roy Schmeck. I've got a bunch of famous people's guitars. Mm-hmm. And but I do keep them in museums. All the good stuff's in museums, and so that people can see them and kind of learn about the history of where the electric guitar came from. Because a lot of people think that the Les Paul, the electric guitar started with Fender and Les Paul in the late 40s, early 50s, which is completely wrong. And Les Paul did not invent the electric guitar, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry.
Who did?
Who did?
Good question.
It was probably one of those things that probably happened around the world, kind of at a similar era, I would imagine. So there's not one person that you can pin it on.
Well, there's a difference between the electric guitar and the modern electric guitar.
Okay.
An electrically amplified instrument is anything that has the ability to transpose vibration into electrons, put it through a cable, put it through an amplifier, and make it louder. And that started with violins.
Okay. Yeah.
In the late teens, early 20s, when amplification was in its infancy and was powered by batteries, and was basically non-portable. And they were big and clumsy, and they were horribly expensive. And by the time tubes were invented, and a power tube and a rectifier tube and a preamp tube, when you could actually have an amplifier that plugged into an outlet, which back when the electric guitar started, outlets in houses were like one per house, maybe.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of guys had adapters that they screwed into a light bulb socket that they could plug their amplifier into, because houses did not have outlets because there was no electric appliances. But there were light bulbs. And, well, a lot of houses didn't have electricity. Salt Lake was one of the first places to actually have electricity and street lights. But anyway, so there were a lot of guys messing with the idea of amplifying stringed musical instruments, but they would be very rural. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't ways to say, hey, look what I've invented. But local guys would build it for themselves, and they would just like use it, and then it would disappear. But the first one that gets real credit for the modern electric guitar, which is a pickup with the string goes over the top of, vibrates through a magnetic field, and turns vibration into electrons through an amplifier, would be probably Rickenbacker in early to mid 1932. Mm-hmm. There were companies like Stromberg Voisinay and Vivitone that preceded them, but they were using vibration transfer driven pickups that took vibrations off of the body of the guitar or off of the body of the violin. And so it wasn't very efficient and wasn't near as good as the direct string driven pickup that Beecham invented. And so those things were kind of like dead limbs on the evolutionary tree.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I already learned so much.
Me too.
Just one second.
I mean, I can't even imagine how you would use a light bulb socket to.
You're basically just using it for the power.
Huh.
Yeah, there's just a little adapter, you can still buy them, that screw into the thing, and it's just two prongs that you can plug an extension cord into.
That's crazy. I did not know that.
Yeah. I had no idea why an amp would have 3 vacuum tubes in it. Totally makes sense now, because one for each. I guess, would you call those a channel?
No, it's stages of amplification.
Yeah, okay. That
you
makes
have a
sense.
rectifier tube that takes the 110 power and turns it into a signal that the amplifier can translate.
Okay.
And that goes through a preamp tube that jacks that signal up a little bit, and then it goes through a single or a cascading number of power tubes, and each one of those tubes amplifies that signal more and more and more.
Okay.
And that's why a single tube amp will generally be 3 to 10 watts. 2 tubes will double that. 4 tubes will quadruple that, because it's rolling the power and just making it more and more as it goes through.
Okay.
Are these those little glass things?
Yeah.
And the backs of amp. Yeah, I used to collect those when he was running the shop at the house.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
You
you
still
can
have them?
see the tubes in my amp out there.
Yeah.
When we get out of here, I'll show
he'd
you.
throw them in the garbage, and I'd go dig them out. And I had a big shoebox full of them because I thought they were cool to look at.
Yeah, they are. And I think there's still maybe I'm wrong, but there's still a pretty big debate on like the best sound comes from vacuum tube amps, right? Like, because you can get, what do you call them? Is it direct amps where they don't have the tubes?
Solid state.
Solid state, yeah.
There is solid state, and a lot of people are doing direct in with digital boxes now, like Axe Effects and whatnot.
Yeah, and what do you think about those, James? Do you feel like those give a different level of sound quality than a tube would?
It's completely different. I think it's more of a sterile sound. It just sounds very studio processed. That's cool if that's what people like. I'm a little bit more old school in that manner. I want my big clunky tube amp and my giant 412 cab and stuff. So I don't know. It's just a preference on sound.
Yeah, that's true.
That's because you're young and tough and don't have to haul it up 2 flights of stairs.
I'm a little bit more beat up than I look, but yeah.
What do you prefer? Would you prefer the vacuum tube? Do you have any like solid state amps or?
There are some solid state amps that I have grown fond of that sound organic enough to be within the 90 percentile of what a vacuum tube amp sounds like.
Okay.
But then again, it depends on what vacuum tube amp you're talking about.
That's true.
Because there's some new vacuum tube amps on the market that are marketed strictly because they're vacuum tubes, but they suck.
Yeah, I can see that. Like the cheap, like a cheap vacuum
and then there's a lot of guys that are making boutique amps that actually, sound real good. But, amps and tone is in the ear of the beholder.
Yeah.
And I don't like the sound of most modern guitars. So that's why I play 50s guitars through 50s amplifiers, because that's just the sound I like.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they ain't cheap. And so most kids can't get their hands on that sound.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something that I think is important that you mentioned there. There's an undertone is playing guitar or any instrument for that matter. You should do it because you enjoy it, and also do it because you want to learn more about it. Not necessarily just let's go. We talked about this before the show a little bit, but don't go necessarily to Guitar Center and buy the cheapest thing possible, because Lynn, what's going to happen if they buy the cheapest thing possible?
Well, if it can't be set up properly, they'll figure that they can't play it, and they'll figure it's their fault, and they'll quit and never give themselves the chance to actually become a musician.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge thing is get a setup that, if you want to play guitar, get a setup that's is correct, and it's not the cheapest thing on the market. Give yourself a chance to enjoy the instrument. Right. Don't cheap yourself out of it to begin with. I
think doing product research, maybe learning about the history of certain things and brands and stuff like that, and watching. We have a limitless source of information right now with the internet, and maybe utilize that. Because people just don't know. Like, they'll walk into a shop and be like, hey, what can I get? What's going to be the best thing for me? And they're going to depend on that salesman. Not all salesmen are going to be honest in that sense.
Or knowledgeable.
Yeah, or even knowledgeable. Places like, I'll name the evil corporate overlords of Guitar Center. Those kids don't know anything in there.
I'm sure there are some Guitar Centers that have one or two kids in there that do care, and they really do appreciate music. But
there's definitely older guys in there that'll point you in the right direction. But a lot of times they're going to point you at those cheap combo packages and stuff like that, and then it's going to be,
So I want to go back to the historic question. What's your favorite historic guitar? And second question, how many do you have?
Two-part question.
It is a two-part question.
I don't have very many. And I keep most of them in museums. Mm-hmm. That's a hard...
Because you love them all?
No. Let's see. Well, I guess I would have to place that question in the terms of importance. And I guess...
Historical importance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I could see a really historically important guitar could also be a favorite, because without it, you'd lose out on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, because I own the first Fender guitar and amp.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Why is that?
Like, how old is that?
It just is.
Yeah.
He's just got some really cool stuff. That's
1940, late 41, late 41. And it's actually, as far as we can tell, the collaboration between Leo Fender and Doc Kaufman prior to Fender being established, prior to K&F being established, that was the big bang of Fender. It was the guitar and amp that Leo decided Leo was a guy who was always looking for a new product. He was always trying to find some way to make the little extra money. And I mean, everything from retipping shoelaces to different kinds of shoe polish. He was just always looking for an idea. He would actually read magazines and little ads in the back of magazines and stuff to try and find ways to bring product into his little radio shop in Fullerton to try and have a bigger revenue stream. Mm-hmm. And he was a decent amp guy, knew nothing about electric guitars or how to build pickups. But there was this cat named Doc Kaufman, who was a musician in Fullerton, who had worked with the Rickenbacker Company through the 30s, didn't work for them, but worked with them. And he was the first guy to actually invent a whammy bar for a guitar.
Oh, wow.
But he actually invented it for a tenor banjo in 28, but it got morphed into being used on guitars in the 30s. And he also invented an electric vibrola guitar in the mid-30s, about 36, 37, that had a sewing machine motor inside of it, that you turned it on and it wiggled the vibrato on the back of the guitar.
Really?
No way.
So it went, it sounded like underwater.
Yeah,
it had a weird underwater swishy sound. And he hung out at Rickenbacker, and one of the guys there taught him how to wind pickups. And Doc Kaufman had a shop in his backyard where he built the odd instrument for people. That's actually where he designed and built the first vibrola guitars. And he would get jobs around Fullerton for the opening of supermarkets and stuff and play on the street in front of the store to attract business, and they would pay him with food.
Everybody's got to eat, man.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because, it was still in the Depression. Things were tough. And there was this kid named Jerry. His last name escapes me. Anyway, he was taking lessons from a teacher in Fullerton. His dad would drive him into Fullerton. They lived on the outskirts of Fullerton. And he started lessons when he was 6 years old. And he was playing Hawaiian lap slide lessons on an acoustic guitar on his lap. Mm-hmm. And by the time he was about 8, his teacher told his dad, I think Jerry's ready for an electric guitar. But the unfortunate thing was the Second World War had just started. And the government had put a stop to manufacturing with metal unless it was absolutely necessary. And so it was hard to order an electric lap steel guitar at the time. And Jerry's dad asked the teacher, well, where could we get such a thing? And she said, just walk around the block here and go to this house just right behind me on the other side of the road, and that's where Leo Fender lives. Mm. And
that's a cool story.
That's crazy, yeah. The rest was history, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And asked Mr. Fender. Jerry never called him Leo. He always called him Mr. Fender. Asked Mr. Fender if he can hook you up with something. Because he sold the odd instrument out of his little radio shop in Fullerton. Mm-hmm. And so Jerry and his dad went over there, and his dad talked to Leo Fender and placed an order with Leo. And Jerry said I interviewed Jerry and videotaped him about 12 years ago, because I got the lap steel and guitar right from the guy who took it out of Leo's Leo's hands. Wow. In Leo's driveway, and the guy was still sharp as a tack. And they ordered the guitar, and he said he thought it was funny that Mr. Fender did not have a picture, a catalog, a brochure, or another instrument he could even show his dad what he was buying. And we figure that's because this is something Leo had never done before. He didn't actually have these things to sell, but he's willing to try anything. And so they go back about 6 weeks later and pick it up. And turns out that Jerry never realized that Leo hadn't built the lap steel, that Doc Kaufman had built it. And so Leo must have got a hold of Doc Kaufman, knowing that Doc built these things in his backyard, and asked Doc to build a lap steel to go with the amp that he was building for this kid. And and in an interview that a friend of mine did with Leo and Doc in '73, that's never been published, he allowed me to publish part of it in a fretboard journal story that I did. Basically, Leo admits in the interview that had it not been for Doc Kaufman pushing him into the guitar business, that he wouldn't have gone into the guitar business.
There would not be a Fender guitar today.
There would not be a Fender guitar
That's
company
a great
today.
story.
Yeah.
So is that the one that you have?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Cool.
And so I think historically, because of what Fender Guitar Company has become, it's the biggest, most prominent electric guitar company on the planet. What it's become, I think that's the most historically important guitar that I own. But I own some of Les. I own one of Les Paul's guitars that was a prototype Gibson they built for him in 1940, and I own Charlie Christian's guitar that he got from Gibson in 1940. And Charlie Christian was the guy who actually changed what jazz was in the late 30s. Died in the early 40s at a very young age. So, and those are historically important from a musical sense. But the Fender amp and guitar set, I think, is the most historically important.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Definitely see that. And
I own Gibson's first electric guitar too.
I was just going to ask you that.
So is that that would be the one that Alvino helped develop? With
That
Gibson?
one, that R&D prototype. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of it. It just looks like a bent frame.
Okay.
I sold that on behalf of Alvino to the Hendrix Museum in the late 90s.
Oh.
And that it was more of an R&D than a prototype.
Okay.
Because a prototype is something that is actually designed and eventually goes into production as it is,
Yes.
or goes into production slightly modified from its form. The thing that Alvino built with John Kudelak in Chicago at the Lyon and Healy facility in '35 was done there on behest of the president of Gibson asking Alvino, when he was playing in Chicago at Drake Hotel, to help Gibson design and build their first electric guitar, because Alvino was an electronics whiz.
Yes.
And he was also the most famous electric guitar player on the planet in the mid-'30s.
Yeah.
And so when he weirdly, he was actually working with Rickenbacker first. And Rickenbacker had mocked up an electric Spanish guitar for Alvino, because Alvino played a Rickenbacker lap steel guitar, a fry pan.
Yeah.
And he had hung out with the guys at Rickenbacker, and they had mocked up a white electric Spanish guitar for him that I have a picture of, but the guitar has disappeared. Alvino said that he loaned it to a friend in Seattle to put in his music store back in the 50s and never got it back. But I'd kill to find that guitar.
do you think it's still out there? Who knows, right?
If a white Howard Roberts looking guitar ever shows up, I'll know what it is.
Yeah.
But when he went to Chicago in early '35 with Horace Hyatt's band, Guy Hart, the president of Gibson, approached him and asked him if he would help them develop an electric guitar. And so he worked with John Kudelak, who was an audio engineer at Lyon and Healy, while he was in Chicago for 3 months on that tour, and then they had to go to the East Coast. But while he was in Chicago, they built a couple mock-ups of an electric guitar trying to get around Rickenbacker's patent. And Alvino still had one of those mock-ups under his stairs when I was his guitar tech from about 1985 till he died in the early 2000s. And that guitar is actually at the Hendrix Museum in the Quest for Volume room, which they had was myself, George Gruen, John Teagle, Richard Smith, and the curator, Pete Blecka, and then a writer from Vintage Guitar Magazine. They hired us as consultants, and we spent 4 or 5 days there in 98 before the museum, when the museum had broken ground, but it was far from being completed. And our task was to, from the collection of guitars that Paul Allen had put together in this vault inside a mountain, crazy to get in there.
Yeah, I bet that is crazy.
Our job was to go through all these guitars that he had put together and choose the ones that we thought were most historically important for the evolution of the electric guitar, or from the beginning of the guitar in America to the present day, which was the late 90s. And so we went through all the guitars, and I don't know how many guitars are in that room. 100, I think. I don't know. But that's when I got to play Jimi Hendrix Woodstock guitar.
Oh, cool.
I can't imagine being in a vault like that with all those guitars.
Mm-hmm.
Just to
It was a crazy. It was a private storage facility that had been built into the side of a mountain, and they had all this secure storage space. Guys stored diamonds there. They stored. I mean, it was
probably climate control.
I was going to ask that question. Yeah.
Yeah,
it
most
was
definitely.
crazy. And you'd walk into the lobby through the door, and there were guards behind this window, bulletproof window, and they would talk to you on the PA out there. And the curator, Pete Blecka, was the head of this whole thing with our group, and he had prearranged to go into this vault. And there was this wall, and in the middle of the wall was this looked like a two-sided glass elevator, but it didn't go up and down. It was just two doors, one on each side. And the person that was in charge of the tour, or whatever they were doing, would go into the glass room, then the door would close. Found out later the doors were bulletproof as well. And then the other side would open, and he would step into the vault area, and then they would open the doors and let us in one by one.
Yeah.
And I asked the guard, I said, what the hell's with that? And he goes, well, we let the head of the group go into the room, and then we asked them, is everything cool?
Yeah, because they could have somebody that's holding them hostage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is everything cool? And then if they say yes, we let them through, and then we let their party through.
Yeah. They probably ask them all the same thing, is
Behind the
everything
glass
good?
that's
Yeah, so
shut,
we
right?
can't hear it out there.
Yeah.
But they're asking him, is everything cool? And Paul Allen had rented the space in this vault where he had all the Hendrix stuff and all the Doors stuff and all these crazy important instruments that he had bought with his billions of dollars to put in this museum. And this big room full of shelves, and there was 5 of us, and the other guys were walking through the shelves, and there's Hendrix amps, and there was all these Arlo Guthrie's. I mean, everybody's stuff.
Yeah.
And I was standing there with the curator, Pete, and the writer from Vintage Guitar Magazine, because he was doing an article for the magazine on this whole thing. And the writer for Vintage Guitar asked Pete, he goes, is it here? And Pete goes, what? And he goes, Jimmy's Strat. And Pete says, yeah, it's just over there. And he said, can I see it? And Pete goes, sure. And so he waved these 2 minions over with the white gloves and the cart.
Yeah.
And he says they went and they brought the guitar back, opened the case, and there's this white Strat that Jimmy played Star Spangled Banner on at Woodstock.
Jeez.
And so the kid from VG says, "Can I play it?" And Pete goes, "I don't know if I should be telling this story." It was 30 years ago. Who cares? Because Pete told me, I asked him for a picture, and he goes, "Hell no, I like my job too much."
Yeah.
So, but he doesn't work there anymore, so it probably doesn't matter. So the kid took it out, and it was still strung left-handed for Jimmy, and he strummed a few chords on it, wanted to put it back in the case, and I said, "Can I play it?" And Pete goes, "Yeah, sure."
Wow.
So I got to play, and then they put it back in the case, and it rolled away.
You know what's amazing is that there are people like you out there that are passionate about the history of this stuff and want to preserve that, because there could have been a million people that guitar could have crossed hands on. They would have been like, whatever, it's just nothing. And it's awesome that you want to preserve that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a story like that, how many people do you think were in that room besides you five? Like in the vault? Probably not many.
Well, not in Paul Allen's vault, no.
Yeah.
And I asked Pete, I said, "So have a lot of guys played this?" And he goes, "Well, not since we've had it." Mm-hmm. And I guess it sold at auction, I don't know when, late 80s, early 90s. And some guy in Europe bought it. And then Paul Allen, because he's from Seattle and Jimmy's from Seattle, and he was obsessed with Jimmy, and boy, does he have some Jimmy stuff. Oh, my God. That museum has a Jimi Hendrix room that just has his fringe leather. I mean, it has all this amazing stuff up there that Jimmy owned. And so he made a deal and bought it from this collector in Europe who had bought it at auction. And they told me how much he paid. I can't say because I had to sign an NDA. Mm-hmm. And but they said, there was no real authentication. Okay. It's just word of mouth that this was that guitar that Jimmy had played at Woodstock. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." So what we did was we went and got pictures of Jimmy on stage playing the guitar. He had a maple fingerboard. Mm-hmm. So you can see the grain of the wood in the fingerboard. And they matched it to the grain of the guitar that Paul Allen had paid all this money for, to make sure that it was actually that guitar.
Yeah, and that's important when you're buying a guitar like that.
I imagine there's no two grains alike. Oh,
no.
Like fingerprints?
Like a fingerprint, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have this up on the screen, Kurt, and it's been driving me nuts because we have Alvino Ray with the prototype lap steel. It kept for more than 61 years, photo that you've provided to this article. And then we've got this damn advertisement. Next to this historic guitar, there's this one that's like only $42.
Here, let me get rid of that for you.
Thanks. Oh, it just turns it.
Oh, that's the current issue of Vintage Guitar.
Oh, I thought that it was an ad for a guitar.
They're trying to sell the guitar.
I see. Yeah. I see.
And if you can find the picture of the new calendar they're putting out, my picture is the January picture.
Oh, cool.
Oh, not of me, but a picture of guitars that I took.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah.
He kept that for 61 years. That's insane. That's like,
and that was in the late '90s. I took that picture.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Is this an article you wrote?
Yeah, that came out I think in Vintage Guitar in
this is on Vintage
January
Guitar's
of
website.
January of '98, I think. Yeah, I actually took Alvino and that guitar, along with the drawings he did for the project, to the NAMM show at the Gibson booth, and we displayed it at the Gibson booth.
Well, that's awesome.
I do know that before that lap steel, he put a pickup in his banjo, essentially. Yeah. I think that was, late teens, early 20s? Late 20s, okay.
When he was playing with Phil Spitalny in New York.
Yes. Did he end up keeping that as well, or was it kind of lost to time?
He swore that he still had that pickup hanging around the house.
Oh, the pickup itself?
And, because it was a best I can tell, it was probably just a crystal pickup.
Oh, okay.
That he modified out of a crystal microphone. Because that's where the guitar pickup came from, was a microphone.
A regular microphone.
I think I remember reading that, yeah.
And, But he swore he had it in one of the drawers in the house, but we could never find it. Yeah.
That would have been crazy.
Yeah, right.
I did kind of a deep dive looking for some of the stuff that he remembered he still had around, and I could never find that pickup.
Oh, wow.
But I found some cool stuff.
Oh, I'm sure.
The original drawings that he did when he worked in Chicago with Lyon and Healy, and when I sold the guitar for him to the Hendrix Museum, I asked Alvino, I said, so do you mind if I keep the drawings? Because they really had nothing to do with the guitar.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, you can have them.
Wow.
So I've still got his original drawing on Hotel Stationery of these crazy designs for pickups and guitars that he did.
Oh, that's
That
great.
is so cool.
Jeez.
Those should be in a museum.
Yeah.
It's like
They
very
have
much
been.
an inventor.
Yeah.
They have been.
Oh, they have.
Yeah, when we did well, actually, they were in the museum in Phoenix for my last exhibit, and they were in the museum in Carlsbad, California, at the NAMM Museum for 3 years. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. This might be a silly question because it's not really guitar related, but when it comes to putting things in museums, is there like a standard time frame that it's in a museum? Because you probably want to move it around to different ones, but I assume that moving something that historic you got to take great care to do that. But they don't always just stay in one museum forever, right?
Not unless you give it to them or the museum buys it.
Okay.
And then a lot of museums will loan their stuff out. In my case, it's hard to find too many museums that are actually interested in a guitar display, because most museums, like art museums,
Sure.
they're local town historic museums. So I have had stuff in the museum in Phoenix going on 12 years. Individual instruments they borrowed from me.
Yeah.
And some they kept after the big exhibit we did in 2018. 2019. Time goes.
It does.
And but usually an exhibit is between 4 and 10 months.
Okay.
Sometimes it can be as short as 3 months, depending on what the museum is doing and the funding the museum has.
Okay.
Because putting together an exhibit can be really expensive. They bring in, like when they brought in my stuff for this exhibit, for the exhibit in Phoenix and the one in Indianapolis at the Idolsjorg, they send an art mover.
Okay.
That's cats that are bonded and licensed to handle millions of dollars worth of stuff. And there's at least 2 drivers in the vehicle. And the vehicle is climate controlled.
Wow.
And it can never be left unattended. And they come to wherever you are, and they pick it up. They'll even pack it. And then they take it to where it's going and drop it off. And so it's it's kind of like a Brinks armored
I was
car
gonna
sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not quite as... You wouldn't know it if you saw it, because it's
Sure.
usually in unmarked vehicles.
Pretty
right?
incognito.
Yeah. And when I loaned the stuff to Phoenix, they actually sent 3 people up for 4 days
Oh, wow.
and packed it all, and then loaded it in the truck and took it down to Phoenix, and then they sent it back the same way.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And I can see that with historic items like that. Yeah, you definitely don't want people knowing where they are, or where they're being transported. You want it to get to where it's going safely, especially just because I'm sure there's a lot of people that do horrible things to get their hands on that, but I think it's more important that somebody can walk into a museum and maybe get inspired by a piece that you have in a museum, or spark something in their brain to become passionate about guitars or looking into the history of that. You know, I don't think enough people do that these days,
Now,
especially with the internet around.
Yeah. And you said that you do documentaries too? I think before we
I
started airing,
I'm
chatting.
Yeah, I film videos, and I'm still working on my documentary about the early Fender amp and guitar. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've got about 15 minutes. Should we take a break, or should we move on to the guitar that you have in the studio, which I think is amazing?
It's up to you.
What about, how are you feeling?
I say march on.
Keep going.
Okay, we'll do it. This is so cool, and we talked. I think Kurt mentioned it, but you have a guitar that has a pickup in it. It's made out of a bedpan. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's back in.
I didn't even notice that until just now.
Yeah. Back in the spring of 1988, I was building custom guitars, and I was a guitar tech, of course. And I would take on about any project that I found that interested me. And one day I was hanging around the house and knock at the door, and I opened the door, and there's this little old lady standing there. She must have been, I don't know, 5 foot tall. She's a little lady, probably in her 70s. And she was holding this gray bedpan. And I opened the door and said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Yeah. I understand that if anybody can build a guitar out of this, it would be you." So I'm looking at this bedpan this lady's holding, thinking, "Oh boy." And so she came in and she talked to me, and she said, "I play guitar at old folks' homes," and I thought it would be fun because the bedpan has to do with not being able to take care of your own business, really. To have a guitar built out of a bedpan is kind of a funny thing. And I said, "Well, let me think about it, and I'll get back with you and see if I can figure something out." Because I built a number of guitars, but certainly never anything out of something that challenging. Because I built solid body wood guitars and Les Paul style and Strat style and set necks and bolt-on necks. I built lots of guitars, but I'd never built anything that had to be thought out and completely engineered. Because I could just, building a Fender guitar is tinker toy work. That's no big deal.
Yeah.
Well, especially now when you can just order everything. But back then I had to hand build everything because you couldn't buy anything. And so I figured out how to build this thing. There was challenges like how to mount the neck and how to keep it from folding in half because it was a thin metal bedpan.
Yeah.
And so I had to put the turnbuckle through the middle of it. And I got that idea actually from a banjo. Okay. Because a lot of old banjos have a tensioning rod going through the body, because if you don't, the body wings out and folds up. Yeah. And also the tensioning rod that goes through helps you pull the body together to pull the neck down, or let it up and let the neck up. And so I thought, well, let's go to the hardware store and get a turnbuckle and put it in the middle of it, and that'll keep it from folding up. And then I had to figure a bridge for it, and cut. And weirdly enough, that was a neck that I had started for another guitar project that I decided I didn't want to do. And so I already had a neck mostly built. It didn't say Zionist Thunder Mug in it when it was hanging, but I and she didn't ask me to do that. But I just thought, I can inlay stuff. I inlaid Zionist Thunder Mug on it.
And I think it's great. It adds to the whole piece,
Because that's what they used to call bedpans, because when you into them, they
Thunderfuck.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't even have thought, I've obviously never built a guitar, but I guess there is enough tension there that it would just fold it in half.
Eventually,
yeah.
Eventually it would.
Tension from the strings, or?
Yeah, tension pull on the strings,
Okay.
And it happens with a lot of acoustic guitars. If you look at a lot of inexpensive acoustic guitars, even some expensive acoustic guitars that are older, if you look across the top right behind the neck into the sound hole, the neck is tipping into the sound hole, and the sound hole is kind of collapsing, and that makes the neck go up and the strings too high to play.
Okay, yeah.
And, and then I had this George L's fingerboard pickup laying around the shop, and I thought, she didn't ask me to put a pickup in it, and I don't know if she's ever going to plug it in.
Yeah.
But it's there, so I threw it in there. And I got it all done. I don't see what's the date on this.
It's like 88.
I used to sign all my stuff.
Yeah, which would make sense.
May 3rd of 1988.
Wow.
So that was one that's under the finish. Is it under the finish? Yeah. So that was probably just about the time just before I put the finish on the neck.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine was in a band called Thin Ice, and they were a long-haired rock and roll spandex band.
Yeah, okay.
And playing that late 80s, kind of music. And I plugged this into an amp I had at home, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't great, but it worked. It wasn't a rock and roll guitar, right?
Sure.
And so I stuck it in the Ovation case that I eventually gave Zina, and went down to a bar on Riverdale Road where my buddy was playing with his band, and walked in with this Ovation case, and he was on stage playing, and he saw me walk in, and he kind of waved to me because I built custom guitars for him. And after the intermission, during the intermission, he came over to my table, and I was sitting there, and he goes, "What do you got?" And I said, "You're going to play this on stage for me."
And he did.
He did.
Yeah.
So he got up after the intermission and played like a couple songs, rock and roll songs, through a bedpan guitar.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Is that your favorite favorite guitar that you've built?
No.
Or not your favorite one, but like it's a fun one. I mean,
Yeah, it's unique.
yeah.
It's definitely a conversation piece.
It is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice it was a bedpan until you just said that. That was crazy.
Yeah. You pour the stuff out of there.
Yeah.
Because I know somebody's going to ask, will you just strum it? Just so people can maybe get an idea of how it sounds.
Well,
You said it sounds like a...
We'll let the guitar player strum it.
Okay, there you go.
I'm left-handed, so
Oh.
it's going to be backwards.
Well, just strum it. You don't have to play anything unless you want to.
It sounds like a bad banjo.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of does. I don't even know how to... Yeah.
I don't even know if it's tuned up.
It's not.
Yeah. But I just know that somebody will ask, like, what does it sound like? I wish I could have heard it.
I cannot play upside down, so thanks for putting me on the spot.
Sounds like a cross between a banjo and a sitar.
Kind of
Yeah,
does. Yeah, it totally
yeah.
does.
Plugged in, it sounds a lot better, of course. But yeah, so and then eventually Zina came and got it, and I never heard from her again. And it was really weird because every once in a while something will go through my mind that, I wonder what happened to something. And one day, out of the blue in my brain, the bedpan guitar pops up, and I thought, well, I wonder whatever happened to that guitar. And I just went on my way. And no shit, like a week later, a guy comes into my store and said, are you Lynn Wheelwright? I said, yeah. And he says, I have a guitar that you built. I built quite a few, so I was like, okay. And he said, it's a bedpan.
Oh, wow.
You're like, I need that.
And I go, yeah, Zina's guitar. And he goes, yeah. And I said, she was my wife's aunt. And I said, she can't still be alive. This was probably 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And she's passed away quite a while ago, but she left the guitar to my wife. And they owned a bar.
Oh, okay.
And it had been sitting in the closet in this bar.
I wasn't even on a shelf on display somewhere.
And in the case.
Oh.
And he said, we don't know what to do with it. He said, do you want it back? And I said, how much? And he told me, and I said, no, I think I made him an offer. And he said, yeah, sure, we'll sell it for that. I think it was like $400.
Sure.
And to me, that was nothing for that guitar to get back.
Sure.
And so he brought it back in, and it had the original case, and it had the guitar was there. But I had a happy face smiley strap that I bought on my way over to Vietnam when I was in Okinawa that I'd given Zina because I thought it would be cute to go with it. But I didn't get that back. But yeah, now it hangs in my living room.
Yeah, it's an awesome.
It is an awesome piece. Yeah.
And you have a bunch of other guitars in your living room. What other ones did you have? You mentioned them a little bit before.
Oh, I have a Mosrite copy that I built for a guy that. When I built that back in the 80s as well. And he wanted a hollow no F-hole, Mosrite style guitar.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, Laura is
And
looking at
what's
you
an
like, what's a
F-hole?
no F hole?
Yeah.
Well, an F-hole is like,
Well-
it looks like the hole in the top of a violin.
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay.
a little opening.
And usually when a guitar builds a hollow guitar, you put an F-hole in it, just so the air can come out and you can hear it.
You've been hanging around on that bar too much, Laura.
I'm surprised you guys did not take that one
Your
and run
mind
with
out of
it.
the gutter.
Oh,
So with
I
it
thought I raised you better than that.
with it being a Mosrite copy, did you throw P90s in there?
No, he actually wanted EMGs in it.
Oh, what?
EMG humbucker pickups.
Really?
He just wanted the Mosrite look, not the Mosrite sound. And
Poser.
I actually used a really cool Shaler prototype tremolo on it.
Oh,
that I
okay.
got from Helmet the same time I bought this bridge at the NAMM show in the mid '80s, and I put a set of EMGs in it. Put the Mosrite headstock on it. It's candy apple red, and I bound it.
Oh, cool.
And it wasn't cheap. It cost him a bunch of money because it was
Yeah.
a lot of work.
Yeah.
And his name was Brad. And he shows up at my door like 6 years later. I had moved, but he found out where I lived. Showed up at my door, and he's standing there with the case and I go, Brad, what's up? And he goes, I want to sell this guitar. And I said, well, why? And he said, because I'm into race cars now. I said, well, okay. I said, man, I custom built that for you. It's one of a kind. I said, yeah, you should keep it. And he goes, no, I want to sell it, and you should have it back.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you want for it? And he told me, and I thought, that's like 1/10 of what I charged you to build it.
Yeah.
The parts are worth that. And so I bought it back, and it hangs on my living room wall, too.
Yeah. It's a beautiful guitar. Yeah. Well, we're getting close to being out of time, but James, you're here with Lynn. Do you have any questions about Pat history or anything that you want to get?
Yeah. I just didn't want to interrupt everything because conversation was flowing.
Sure.
I was
Go
actually
ahead.
interested. I know that you developed a relationship with the very, very famous Alvino Ray in the 80s. And then we're with him until his unfortunate passing in 2004. I was just wondering how that came to be.
A friend of mine in Ogden who worked on Alvino's guitars and banjos got a hold of me in the mid-'80s and said, I have this. And I knew he worked on Alvino's stuff because I'd been to his house and I had seen Alvino's banjos and some of his guitars and stuff there that Nick was working on. And Nick said, I need somebody to go to Salt Lake with me. And Alvino's got all these guitars that he wants appraised. And I told him the only person I knew that was capable of doing that, because I dealt vintage guitars, was you. And he said, would you mind coming down and doing this? And I said, no, that's fine. And so I went down there and met Alvino, and he was really standoffish because I guess a lot of guys had taken advantage of him in the past.
Yeah.
And so he started pulling these guitars out, and they were like one-of-a-kind Fender, custom color, custom built for him guitars. And I would look at the serial number on them, and look at the appointments on the guitar and go, oh, man, this is like a 1959 or 1962 or whatever. And Alvino looked at me and goes, how do you know this? I said, well, that's what I do for a living. I do vintage guitars, and you got to know what you're doing to make sure you get the right thing. And so he pulled, 12, 13 guitars out of his storage area. And I looked at them, and then I asked him, I said, so why are we appraising this? Is this for insurance, or what's it for? Because, there's different appraisal values, whether or not it's going to auction, whether or not it's being sold retail, whether or not it's being insured.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I want to sell some of this stuff. He said, but those crooks in Nashville want 25%.
Oh.
And that was the going rate.
Yeah.
But I looked at this bevy of amazing instruments and thought, man, none of this stuff's going to be hard to sell.
Oh, of course.
And I said, I'll do it for 10%. And he said, you will?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And I said, but, a lot of them need a little work here and there. And he goes, well, who does that? And I go, I do. I've been a custom builder and guitar tech. I said, I can fix all these up and make sure, they're playing right and set up right and stuff before we sell them. And he had some of the most amazing stuff. Holy moly. And so anyway, that's how I started being his guitar tech. And I'd go down to his house and see, he lived in Sandy, at the mouth of the canyon up there. And I'd go down there at least once a month and pick up guitars and guitars he wanted to sell. I drove to California a couple of times to sell stuff for him. And anyway, I just became his guitar tech and the guy that fixed all his stuff. And we'd sit and talk about the old days. And he had photograph albums of all these, of the big band and all the places he had played. And he had stories, and it just evolved into me having the chance to hang out with one of the guys who was the first electric guitar player in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, he's also credited to possibly being one of the very first people to ever come up with electric guitar effects as well. An early version of the talk box. Yeah, one of the very first people to ever play electric guitar on national radio.
The first guy to play electric guitar on national radio.
Yeah,
I own that
the
guitar.
very, very
Oh,
first
geez.
guy.
Do you really?
And for people that don't know, he helped Gibson create their very first electric ever.
He did, and he also helped Leo Fender create steel guitar.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he and Leo were great friends. Yep.
Without him, that would change the course of guitar history forever. It wouldn't be the same.
If it wasn't him, it probably would have been somebody else.
That's true. I guess you just need one person like that, right?
Yeah, Alvino was probably the earliest nationally known promoter of the electric guitar. He was back in 32, 33 when it first came out, and everybody thought it was a carnival trick and a joke.
Sure.
He actually put it to work in a way that showed other musicians that it was a viable product and that they could actually use it to make money, which that's the only reason a musician bought an instrument back then was to make money, right? The height of the Depression, 32, 33. And so he's actually the first guy to put it in the ears of America through the airwaves of the radio.
Wow.
An innovator.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Well, I think we're at time. Since we went through the break, we didn't get a chance to prep you at the break. The way that we end the show is I'll just say it's been the weekly InSalt, and then we all just hang up our headphones and we'll walk out the door. And then that's it. The last thing the listener hears is the door close.
Where's my check?
Kurt's got that for you. He actually has 2 checks.
I'll have it when you have mine.
You said I was getting a coupon booklet.
I do. I had for Jiffy Lube.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But thank you so much for sharing your story with us and the stories you have. It definitely makes me want to go to Phoenix and see your exhibit.
Oh, it's closed.
Oh, is it closed now?
Oh,
Dang.
they took the exhibit came out of there 3 years ago.
Get wrecked, Wade.
Oh, I guess I'll just have to come up to your house and take a look.
You should write your memoirs. Are you writing a book?
But you need to go down to the museum anyway because it's a very cool museum.
Okay.
I finished a book 2 years ago with Nacho Banos and Billy Gibbons.
Yeah, Billy Gibbons did the art for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Yep, it's called The Pinecaster, and it's a
Yeah.
4-volume, 17 pounds of Spanish paper with, 1,000 pages and almost 90 videos of guys playing all these historic, important guitars.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is
You can
amazing.
buy it from me for $275.
There you go. Where at? Just come into your shop or just
At my shop up in Clearfield. Yeah, it's that's how Nacho paid me. Was 100 sets of books.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And the shop name is again?
Pro Musician Outlet in Clearfield.
Yeah. So go if you want to go learn about the history of guitars. I mean, you're the guy. You know it all. You have go buy the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buy some strings, buy some picks, buy something.
Don't go in there and not buy anything.
And don't go
Buy
in there just to
anything.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Lynn. Everybody else, hope you have a great week. This has been your weekly InSalt. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
You
that was
coming out
fun.
here. Kurt, you should have told me about your dad a long time ago, dude. Just tried.
Yeah, keeping this secret from all of us.
Some great stories.
I'll just come right back in. Thank you, I appreciate it. Did you answer all your questions? Did you get all your questions?
No, not at all.